in IS 6.0 or 5.0, number of requests that can be queued into that particular IS server. Okay, yep. Once that, there is also one configuration setting where after exceeding some those number of requests, yep. that worker process will recycle. Yeah. And that's why maybe that can be the one of the reasons.
I look at that as it's a good point. So he brings up in IS in 6 definitely, possibly 5. You can modify and do a lot of kind of recovery type operations where when the request meets a certain point or memory hits a certain point to auto recycle the pool. It's good, and I've used it before. Where it hurts is it actually cancels any running requests. So if I'm in the midst of waiting for a payment to go through and I'm checking out in a store and it recycles the app pool, I may actually lose my thing and I come back with a 500 error or something like that on the client side. So it's actually a really bad client experience. And I've only used it in cases where we're in the midst of debugging, we don't quite have a solution yet, and it at least saves the system admin from being paged every couple of hours to recycle the app pool. So I've used it as temporary workaround. And I'd say if you're filling up that request queue, it's either time to buy more servers or do some performance analysis.
Web garden or web farming would be great in such scenarios.
Yeah, web farms are perfect in that. And again, IS7 does a lot to make web farming way easier. There's a MSDN webcast on all the improvements around web farm stuff in IS7. I highly recommend it. If I look at, again, IS7, I said this yesterday if you weren't here, this is the thing that's driving Windows Server 2008. When you look at who is looking out there to buy Windows Server 2008, it's all about IS7 because they've improved the operations and the development side. Everybody wins with IS7. So it's really driving a whole lot of deployments out there. So if you're on IS5 today or 6 today, they've worked on compatibility. We'll talk about that in my next session in terms of what it takes to get up there. There are some gotchas, there's some things to watch out for, but overall it's not really a painful experience. It's just a little bit of work and you can get up to IS7 and take advantage of all these great tracing tools and find out what's going on inside your worker process and what's actually happening to cause it to stop responding is a great example. Who knows, that may be a great little migration test. Spark up IS7, throw your app on it, see if you can actually get it to stop responding, and then pull the information out using some of these tools. So there's a few options there. So thank you very much, folks, and we'll see you if you're coming back.
Again, forgive some of the repeat introduction, but Office SharePoint Server is the fastest selling product in Microsoft history. Bigger than any operating system launch, bigger than Windows 95, bigger than any version of Office. It's huge. It's popular. So you're in the right place. There is a strong demand for developers who can customize on the SharePoint platform. So you're in the right place. One of the hot features in Microsoft Office SharePoint Server is Excel services. So I'm going to show you here today. I'm going to try and show you kind of just about everything. We'll visit everything in Excel services so that you're familiar with its capabilities, and also perhaps as a developer, a couple little things that you can do to get started with Excel services. So again, for those of you, thank you for putting me on billboards all over Bangalore. That was kind of cool. You unfortunately took them down on me, so I wasn't able to get a real picture with them before, but that's kind of neat. Very, very happy to be here this week. So I'm an instructor for the course that's at tedpattison.net called The Great SharePoint Adventure. In my opinion, it is the only good developer course for SharePoint. It's 5 intensive days where we take you through everything. And as one gentleman pointed out for me, yes, actually, if you go to tedpattison.net, they do offer distance learning. So that's a possibility, is that you can actually get that course material. And everything I'm doing here this week is kind of little previews, little glimpses into the courseware. And I highly encourage you to pursue the certifications in SharePoint. Help differentiate you from others. Very important to do that. And so that you can demonstrate a bit of skill and capability with the SharePoint development side. There are a total of 4 certifications for SharePoint. 2 on the administrative side, 2 on the application side, and then the 2, what they comprise is first, it's Windows SharePoint Services, the basic stuff. And then the other certification has to do with the Office SharePoint Server. Okay, so what are we going to talk about in this lecture? Well, we're going to talk about Excel services in MOS 2007. We need to configure something called trusted file locations. You know what? In SharePoint, it's always, for you, the developers, always about deployment, because SharePoint, the environment trusts nothing. Nothing will run in this environment unless it's been configured to do so. So a lot about what we're going to do here today is configuration, and trusted file locations is saying that I trust Excel services to run at this location. And then once we've got it running and we've got a spreadsheet in Excel services, we'll look at Excel Webparts, something called key performance indicators. And you'll see that basically once I have a spreadsheet in a document library, then I can use it as a data source in my portal, and I can expose all kinds of data and information from those spreadsheets. And there's another thing we can do. So let me just come back and say Excel services is Excel running on the server, finally. How many of you have tried in the past to run any Office application, like especially Word or Excel, by installing it on a server and actually trying to run it so you could do something like produce documents or run spreadsheets? Anyone tried it? It's not fun. It really is a single user application. So anytime it would throw an error or something like that, the process would stop and you have to go figure out what's going on. So that was never fun. We've had Excel Webparts before too. I mean, even with Office 2000, I was introducing the little ActiveX DLL web Internet Explorer plugins that you could run pivot tables in and stuff like that. So we've had kind of the web view for a while too. But this time, truly, we have an Excel running on the server. And now when we deploy spreadsheets, it's not only about viewing information on the web and treating things as data sources, but I can actually run the Excel object model against the spreadsheets. Now, what's so great about this? Well, that really enables user self-service capability. So it really helps enable the vision of SharePoint in that users and end users can publish information into the environment. They don't need developers, quote unquote. So the person who has Excel 2007 can publish a spreadsheet to a secure location and expose only the information. They're in control of what information and what type of calculations that you're able to run on those spreadsheets. So they can do so securely with all of the features of a document library, including check-in, check-out, versioning, that type of thing. So the user the super user, and there's probably one of those in every organization, who is great with Excel. They'll be better than me. I ever will be. I am not much of an Office application user. I'm not an Excel expert. But I've seen people do amazing things with spreadsheets. And so the good news is that to get a hold of their information and make it usable within a portal, we don't have to do anything except publish that spreadsheet inside of Excel services. So very powerful, wonderful good news for the person that's an expert at Office applications. Remember what I said before too. Office SharePoint Server was built by the Office team. So it was built by the Office team to do one thing: sell licenses for Microsoft Office 2007. So Microsoft Office 2007, a very key part of the equation here. So then we look at publishing our spreadsheets, but then locking them down. We can specify what we want to publish, and we can also lock it down with parameters, or provide parameters so that we can actually run the spreadsheets on the web. We'll also look at user-defined functions using Visual Studio tools for applications. If you didn't know, in Office 2007 comes down with kind of a scaled version of Visual Studio.net called Visual Studio Tools for Applications. And they can use that to write C# code. And they can create, so thank goodness, no more macros, right? They can write functions in C#, user-defined functions. So now they're writing code in C#. And then finally, we'll look at Excel Web Services. In other words, you don't really have to code SharePoint per se. There's a web service that you can just open a spreadsheet and run the spreadsheet, run the Excel object model using the Excel services remotely. So you can write a Windows application and make use of the spreadsheet that in our example, for example, will do a mortgage calculation. So the calculation is embedded in the spreadsheet. I can open it, I can run it, I can get the result back in my Windows application, I can display that. So lots of exciting things over the next hour or so. Right now, we are solidly right here. We're in the business intelligence section. That's where these next 2 lectures are going to focus. This one on Excel services, and we'll look at the report center and dashboarding as well here. And the final lecture this afternoon will focus on business data catalog. That's right after lunch in the main hall, in case you didn't get the changes to the schedule. There is a change, so my next presentation will be in the main hall right after lunch. Okay, so let's look at the first couple things, Excel services and trusted file locations. Let's get a spreadsheet running in Microsoft Office SharePoint Server. Okay, just got to resize this a little bit here. So we got, let me make a little bit of room here. That's what I can do. Taskbar, this out a little bit. Okay, make a little bit more room here. Okay, so by the way, what I've created here is one of the collaboration portals. Okay, so I just created a collaboration portal, which is a site collection, and it has a lot of sites underneath it. A report center, a document center, so these are all site template types that come with the Office, both the Enterprise and Standard Edition, and then I can create this collaboration portal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head into the Document Center, to this document library, and what I'd like to do is I would just love to show you Excel services. All I have to do is upload a spreadsheet here, and I can view it on the web, sort of. But remember, SharePoint trusts nothing. So the first thing you have to do is I'm just going to take the URL here. So I cut and paste kind of the easiest way. I need to head off to, hang on, I got quite a few things open here. Just let me close all those Internet Explorer instances down and open a new one up here. Okay, so where I wanted to be was this Document Center, Documents. And so what I'm going to flip out to is the SharePoint Services Central Administration Console. That's where all the administration is done for SharePoint. That's never a good sign, is it? Okay. So central administration. This would take a different lecture, but the Excel services are under the context of something called the shared service provider. That is what the MOS Standard Edition introduces, is an idea of central services, like the user profiles, and search, and audiences. And then when I install MOS Enterprise, I get these two things. These two sections will appear: Excel services and business data catalog. What's shared services in a nutshell? It just means that the different site collections, the different web applications can be assigned to a single shared service provider. So literally, if I define these services, they would be shared over, quite a number of site collections. So the one I'm interested right now is trusted file locations. So just note, an administrator must add a trusted file location, and effectively what they're doing is just giving the URL. Oh, I didn't do my copy and paste here. Just 1 second. Okay, so I just give it the URL to that particular document library. And I have a couple of options here. I can say trust children. In other words, don't forget, by the way, any of these libraries could have subfolders or subsites or whatever. So I'm not going to worry about that right now. Another couple of important settings are about whether I'm going to allow external data. So in other words, that spreadsheet might attempt to go out and get information, say, from a SQL Server database. So it defaults to no. So if it attempts to do that, it would fail. There's one choice here that says trusted data connection libraries only. That's kind of, maybe if I have some time at the end, I'll describe that a bit more. But in essence, a data connection library is just a type of library. And within Office, I can define ODC files, Office Data Connection files. And so I would have to export those from my spreadsheet, say, and actually import those into this library type called a data connection library. Then I would, in a different little interface, I can trust the data connection library. And then the spreadsheet is now allowed to use the connection files from the Trust Data Connection library and thus be trusted to get data. So it's actually a reasonable amount of extra configuration if your spreadsheet does something as simple as access to SQL Server data, a database to get product information or something like that. Okay? So again, you can ask me about that later, and if I have time at the end, I can kind of just go through the steps required to get the data trusted. And then finally, I can say trusted data connection libraries and embedded, so that kind of gets around it. You know, I'm kind of giving it full trust. And finally, there's a specific section here about, do I let it run user-defined functions? Because actually now we're talking about running .NET code, .NET C# VBNet code. So am I going to let it run macros? Am I going to let it run code? Yes. Okay, so the administrator has now basically configured a location where the Excel services can run, and those Excel spreadsheets can, again, run C# code that I've written as user-defined functions, and it can go out and get data. So now I can come back here, and I can upload, I'll upload a spreadsheet. So I'll go to, I want Excel demo for, no, I'll get it later. It's okay. Okay, so where do I want to go? Okay, I want this sales summary sheet. And I'll just go, actually I'll go there and just show it to you very briefly. It's a simple spreadsheet. 61, file 7, starter. I'll just open up sales summary in Excel 2007. Oh, I'll prevent one question. To run Excel services, like that ability to see the spreadsheet in the web browser, do I need Excel 2007? Absolutely 100% correct. I can have spreadsheets that are Excel 2003, but they will not be able to run in Excel services. So at the very least, you would maybe have to convert it, right? You'd have to save it in the Excel 2007 format if you want the spreadsheet to participate. And that may be a simple, trivial task, or it may be quite involved. I have to leave it to you and your spreadsheet. Here's a sales summary spreadsheet. So here's a typical thing I've seen 100 times. That idea that someone will track kind of sales or Salesforce information in kind of how are we doing by region, by quarter kind of thing. Right? That's pretty typical. And so they'll type in all the numbers and they produce a little chart. Just one thing, just a little thing I'm going to note for you, kind of a best practice. You know, you can do named ranges and named items in Excel. So this thing, for example, this chart is called sales chart. Please name your ranges and items if you want that data to be easily referenceable and displayed in Excel services. You'll see what I mean in just a little while. But if you name your items, you'll just have an easier time of it. Okay? So I want to see if I can see this spreadsheet on the web. Right? That's what's going to be exciting here. So I'll upload the spreadsheet to my document library. I've trusted it. You know, I've trusted this library location. So I should be able to now drop this down and say View in Web Browser. You don't seem impressed. This is cool. Come on. I know it's really simple, but it's cool. I have Excel on the web. Now, by the way, this is read-only. Okay? Like, it's not like I can go to the cells. It's not Excel, the client application on the web. I'm just viewing this information. And notice I have the sheet interface down here. And so far, this is actually pretty simple. I'm going to use this example just to show you that I can use Excel as a data source. I'm just going to kind of catch up in my slides in case I think I'm heading on to the next section here. So again, with my slide decks, what I do is I just paste in a couple of key screenshots here. Now, one thing to note is this is the site features. Sorry, I should have put a title on that. This is the site collection features. And what I need activated is there's Office SharePoint Server standard features, Office SharePoint Server enterprise features. Make sure that those are activated, because if this is not activated, then Excel services is not running. Okay? So I need to have that activated. Check it at the site collection level and the site level. So, okay, so those are turned on. That's important. It's shared services administration, the Excel services settings, where I can have the administrator indicate which areas are trusted to run the web browsing for Excel. He will add a trusted file location. In this case, it was my document library. And then I can view in web browser, and I got that web view. So that's what we just did. So the next part is, let's use that spreadsheet as a data source. Okay, so let's look at Excel Webparts, key performance indicators, and dashboards, kind of give you a good view of the fact that I can use data from Excel sheets. Okay, so let's close that down. Okay, so what do we want to do here? Let's go to the home page. And the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to define a new library here. New list, I should say. I'm going to create something here under custom lists called a KPI list, Key Performance Indicator. It's a fancy name for data points that will show you whether something is red, yellow, or green in static. Big deal, but it's kind of fun. So I'll call this library my KPIs, so I can define many of them. I will create a new one, new key performance. So this is interesting. So the way I can integrate data, by the way, in whether it's the Webparts or the dashboard or whatever, is, so a key performance indicator, I can use data in a SharePoint list. Well, that would be obvious, wouldn't it? I can use data in an Excel workbook. That's the example I'm going to do. But also notice I can use an indicator using SQL Server 2005 analysis services. That's cool. So I can actually use a cube, and maybe that's where my aggregated sales information is, and I can base my indicators off that. Or even using manually entered information. So for example, if I'm kind of judging the morale at the conference today, how you guys look and feel, I could kind of manually enter whether I think that's kind of red, yellow, or green. I'll rate it at about yellow right now, because I'd like to see a little more enthusiasm from you guys. It's still before lunch. After lunch, I understand you're kind of full, you get a little more tired, but right now you should be full of energy, and we've already had our coffee break. So let's use the Excel workbook. And so I get to name it. I'll call it, sales year to date. This is an interesting little user interface widget. So it says, point out the workbook. So I have to, sorry, because of the scrolly thing here, I have to navigate, just keep having to scroll, to the point in my site collection. It's under my document center. It's under the documents library, and it's the sales summary spreadsheet. So that's the spreadsheet I want to pull my information for. And then I got a really other very interesting interface here. It says set the indicator values for red, yellow, and green. It actually uses Excel services to pull that off. So see, I got my Excel sheet displayed up here. And so it wants me to set the indicator value. So what am I looking for in terms of a status? Well, I'm going to use the sales from quarter one. Okay? And then so I can highlight it on the thing, and I can say set here. Now I could have typed that in, right? I could have been as simple as typing in sheet 1, C7. but the interface just makes it a lot easier to do. So now that I said that's what I'm comparing again, it says, what's the value for the goal? Well, maybe, for example, it's the field I call goal. So it's a little obvious in this example. And then a warning level. At what time am I changing from like red to yellow? That kind of thing. It's the red-yellow barrier. And then the indicator versus the goal is kind of the yellow to green. Okay? So I've set the values that define red, yellow, and green. And in this scenario, since the real value is 3.3 million and the goal was 3, I'll have a green because I'm exceeding my goal. Right? Anything below the goal and above the warning level would be yellow, and anything below the warning level would be red. So I should see a green indicator show up here. Oh, by the way, that's really funny. Someone's trying to port scan my computer. What do you got? It's okay, it's blocked. If you think you're getting anything interesting off my computer, it's not that interesting anyway. So, the one thing I have a choice of here are better values are higher or lower, right? If we're doing a campaign to raise money, then higher is better. But if we have some cases where we might be getting down to 0 or something like that, so counting down or getting towards 0 might be a better idea. So lower numbers would be better. So I'll say OK. OK, so actually, if you see it off the corner there, I have a status of 3. But this just defines them. Okay, it's the web parts that really show things off here. So let me come to the home page, and I'll just show you a couple of web parts. I'll put the page in edit mode. And a couple of web parts I have at my disposal here are one for the key performance indicator, KPI indicator, so I'll put one of those on. And the other one is, it should be in this, Excel Web Access. So it's actually using, again, Excel services within a web part. So I'm going to add those. So just to get, this will be a little better if it's up top, so I'll put the KPI here. So I have to select the key performance indicator I want to show in my web part. This is the way to do it, right? You define it in the library and you show it off in a web part. So I'm going to select the indicator list. That's kind of a similar type of interface. Go to my top level site, go to my KPI list, and I pick the key performance indicator that I just defined. So that's good for that one. So you can already see it. See, it shows off a nice little summary there of my key performance indicator and the fact that it's green. And then on the workbook thing, it's like, so I want to show off some data from a workbook. So first I choose the workbook, which is similar to what I was doing before. I have it in the document center, documents, still that sales summary sheet. And this is the best user interface in the product. Watch. I have to do the named item. So remember I said before, name your items if you want to show them off. And it gives me this brilliant user interface, which is a text box. So there's, after all that brilliant user interface, there's no interface to actually pick the named items from an Excel sheet. So I gotta know it, and I better type it right, or it won't work. Kind of silly, but there you go. Okay, so there we go. Let's publish the page so I can just show it to you. Brilliant. See, I can use Excel actually as a data source. And the person in the organization who's using Excel is completely free to publish. Now, the idea being that only that user, perhaps, has access to that actual document library, so no one can go there and see anything. It's totally secure. Only that user could be able to, for example, check out and edit. And by the way, by using the versioning, the minor versions mean that they publish drafts. In other words, they could continue to work on their new spreadsheet for February and save their work, save their drafts. but it's not until it gets published that everyone sees it. So they could actually go to that document library and work on the February figures, and this would continue to stay static until, as soon as they publish this, then this information gets automatically updated. So that's very cool. But wait, there's more. I'll just show you quickly here. So in Report Center, this is a Report Center template. Kind of really shows off. There's a sample dashboard here. And it kind of really goes to town with Excel sheets and Webparts. I just want you to take note of this graph, by the way, just for a sec. Just kind of get a rough idea of the colors and the distribution, because I'm about to do something. These Webparts as well, you can apply filters to, in other words, queries. So here's a filter part up here called Count Representative. And what it allows me to do in this case is pick from a list of account representatives, like this person. And when I apply it, the filter gets applied to the Webparts on the page. And therefore, I can actually change the data display. So you can see, again, I just wanted you to see that distribution of the graph is quite different. So you would also be able to show them their sales targets as opposed to the company sales targets. So that's very cool as well. Okay, that requires some kind of thought and integration, but that's kind of really cool. Okay. Always got to remind myself when this session ends. I ask that every time. This one ends at when? 12:20? I think so, right? I'm sure the 10-minute guy, wherever he is, will warn me enough time. So again, just in the slide deck, I just threw a few things in there, just showing you what I configured in terms of the chart and Webpart, that I can define a KPI list, and then I can define individual key performance indicators based on data in Excel workbooks. That's just a view of actually setting the values for the key performance indicators, which itself is using the Excel services view to choose the values. And there again is a quick view of the dashboard itself in terms of that's the idea. You want to build a dashboard that consolidates all of this great information from multiple different data sources. Excel services, SharePoint lists, analysis services, SQL Server. So the next thing we can do is, instead of just putting spreadsheets in a library, probably what we might want to do is actually get into having the person publish the spreadsheets. And then they have also a bit more control over what they publish. So let's look at an example here. No, sorry. Okay. So I'm going to head down. Let's look at mortgage calculator. So this is a simple spreadsheet that will perform a calculation. That's kind of the idea. So if I got a sales price of a home in euros here, which is 250,000 euros, yeah, good luck in Europe getting something for that. Down payment percentage is 25%. Mortgage is, 25 years. Annual interest rate is 8%. And, it gives me the monthly payment. Big deal, right? What I want you to note is that in typical fashion, as you're developing spreadsheets, the thing that you're working with or viewing is here. And oftentimes, they put on other spreadsheet tabs, that's where they'll drag in data or have secret stuff or proprietary stuff. This section isn't doing anything, but for example, it says this sheet contains some private guidelines guiding customers to the best mortgage. So it could be some internal information. So as I publish this to the web, I certainly don't want them to see sheet number 2. The second thing that I'd like them to be able to do on the web is actually run the mortgage calculator on the web in Excel services. Okay? So we're going to publish this sheet. And again, I'm just going to head off to my document library. That was back here in Document Center. Documents. And I'm just going to copy that document library because I want to cut and paste that. Okay. So back to my spreadsheet. So now the person, knowing that they have access to that physical document library, from Microsoft Office hits Publish. And they publish to Excel services. So I'm going to enter the location, instead of being a file location, as a URL, the document library. And I'll call it Mortgage Calculator, that's fine. And here, under Excel Services Options, right now it says Entire Workbook, but I can limit that. I can say only the first sheet that they can see in Excel Services. And also the parameters. You can see that 3 of the parameters are already added, but I can take them away. In other words, what parameters in the spreadsheet am I allowing them to actually manipulate? So I can remove them all, or in this case, I'm going to add them all so that they can use this. So add the mortgage length to what they can view and manipulate. Or I could have locked it down, for example, right? I could have locked it at 25 years and not given them the ability to do it. I also see it's taking what I filled in the spreadsheet as default values. So I can even provide default values for when the spreadsheet comes up. Okay, so I'll just publish that in. I'll save it into the library. I'll shut it down, and it will offer, oh, okay, well, I can use it. It will offer typically for me to check it in, right? So remember, check in, major versions, minor versions, that sort of thing. So now I have the same Excel view. Notice that I only have the first spreadsheet here. The first sheet. The second one is gone. It's not in the view. Remember, Excel itself doesn't let me type in the cells, so it's just literally a display, maybe even a little misleading. But I want you to note over here now, the parameters that I exposed are here, and the user can get at this and manipulate. So let's run a mortgage calculation. So the annual interest rate could be 0.07. The down payment percentage could be 25. The mortgage length could be 20 years, and the sales price is 300,000 euros this time. I hit the apply button and see that it actually recalculates in the spreadsheet. Okay. So that was publishing spreadsheets with the parameters. So this is the person working in Excel. And remember that they may have additional sheets, which is very common, that they'll put, either drop-down lists in, or information, or calculations, or things that they may want to keep secret to themselves. Then what they do is they can actually now publish to the document library. Again, what this allows them to do is take advantage of everything that a document library offers in terms of, I'll just let this guy get the picture, so I'll pose for you. No flash. Where was I? I was concentrating on my photo. Again, it offers everything that the document library, so they can check out the document for editing. Again, they can publish minor drafts so that you won't see the information, but they're able to save it. And then when they publish a major draft and check it in, that's when anything that's tied to that spreadsheet, any data display, Webparts, or anything else, that's when they'll update when we have a major version. Okay? So the location, instead of saving to a file system, they can actually enter the URL of the document library, and they can actually save into a SharePoint location. And again, I'll just emphasize that that library must be a trusted file location as configured by Excel services by the administrator in this SharePoint central administration. Okay? So if all of that configuration hasn't been done, then it wouldn't work. Okay, and then when we go to publish, I was just showing you that they have control over what sheets and what parameters that get exposed to the outside world. Okay, so let's look at the same mortgage calculator, but the actual calculation I'll write in C#. Well, I won't. I'll just demonstrate it to you. So I have the same thing. I'll shut it down for now. That's fine. Shut all that down. So, by the way, when I went to close the actual spreadsheet, see that it prompts me here, and that's when I can check it in and do the minor or major draft. So I'll do the major one. So now, everyone will see this as the latest information. Okay. So I can bring open Microsoft Visual Studio, and I can just write a class library. So it's just public class calculator. It's just a class. Public double calculate mortgage. It's just a method. So I just write a class, write a method, which does my mortgage calculation. And all I have to do here is saying using Microsoft Office Excel Web Server UDF. I can mark the class as a UDF class. In other words, it can be used for user-defined functions. And expose the method by saying UDF method. Very similar to if you were like doing a web service, right? You'd mark the method as web method. So it's very similar. That's it. You have a user-defined function. Cool. But then let's see, I have this version of my spreadsheet. So now I have a version that does it by the UDF calculation. There's nothing here. So sales price. Okay. Equals, sorry, no. I'm going to come here, and I'll just use user-defined function equals calculate mortgage. Price. Oops, I just want to make sure I've got it's sales price, mortgage length, down payment, sales price, mortgage length, down payment, sales price, comma, mortgage length, down payments. Oh, sure. Well, I'm stressing over my PC here. It's a good shot. Kidding. And annual interest percentage. Otherwise, I get some interesting results. Annual interest rate. So, by the way, what I kind of lose right now, because I want this running in Excel services, is the fact that I can't kind of run that right now. I'll see it when it gets published. But did it not complete? Oh, I wonder what happened here. I must not have hit enter. My apologies. Mortgage length, down payment, annual interest. Thought I had that all. Oh, there they are. Okay, they are sitting there. I just can't see them. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to point out one thing in central administration. The SharePoint Services Central Administration. This is code, right? It compiles to a .NET assembly, a DLL. And remember, SharePoint trusts nothing, right? You can never run code in SharePoint unless it's trusted in some manner or another. And that happens in central administration under the shared service provider. User-defined function assemblies. Okay, I've already added it, but basically, I actually have to add in the UDF DLL functions here for them to be trusted to run. And secondly, don't forget that the library itself, that Document Center Documents library, one of the properties when I added a trusted file location was if it would run the UDF function. Remember, that was an attribute as well. So those two things have to match up before my UDF function will run. Okay, but I have it installed. Effectively, I have it installed here. So if I publish a spreadsheet, so I should be able to publish this spreadsheet to Excel services. Do I have my, yep, I want to publish it there. Again, I'll look at the options. Same thing. I just want to publish the first sheet. It's not any different. I want to add all the parameters and save this version. Okay. Hopefully it works. Okay. I didn't add any defaults. I could have done that. But annual interest is 10%. Down payment is 20. The mortgage length is 25 years. The sales price is, it's going up, 350,000 euros. Apply. And, oh well, I made probably a small mistake. So what I'll do is I'll go to, just to show it to you, just to prove it to you. Go to the, documents, and I will do a view in the web browser for this one. Okay. So I kind of pre-baked it because I just wanted to be sure it was working. So annual interest rate, so again, 10, down payment percentage, 20, mortgage length 25 years, 350,000. So again, this scenario is kind of neat because it actually called a .NET assembly to do the calculation for the mortgage. So that's pretty neat. Okay, so that's doing user-defined functions. And finally, so we'll look at that again. So the code is simple. It's, again, just a class library. Put in this using statement and decorate the class and the methods that you want to use as functions in your library. And then within Excel services, there was a place where you import those DLLs effectively and expose them as user-defined functions. Finally, we have Excel Web Services. And so this is me now wanting to write some code to exercise the Excel object model. And one thing I want to do is I want to go to the Excel services themselves. SharePoint has, I don't know, 30 web services available to you. So the first way that you could actually program SharePoint without programming SharePoint is just to tap into all the web services that are available. For example, there's ones that if you need data from a SharePoint list, there's a web service for that. You can actually call it, get the list data, and retrieve it out as via web service, and then incorporate that data into your application if you have an outside application. Excel services is one of those things. So I can actually open workbooks and perform all these typical methods that are typical for manipulating an Excel spreadsheet. And it's, you know, it's Excel service.asmx. So I make a reference to it, and I can start programming against that web service. So here's the code. I'll kind of just take you through it very briefly. It's fairly simple. So I got a button. I click a button, so it'll invoke the calculation. And so I have a reference to the web service, so it's just creating a new instance of the web service. I'm just saying I'm using my default credentials, which are integrated. And I create this thing called a session ID. I'm just basically opening the workbook. So it's like opening the file, opening the spreadsheet. And I just reference it as its URL. Right? So it's full URL to the document library. And then once I've opened the workbook, I'm just executing the SharePoint object model. So here I'm setting the cells. So I have to, by the way, what I have in front of this is a Windows form. So, you know, you fill in the 4 things, you hit a button, and it basically sets the cells that are in the spreadsheet to those values from the text box. And then I run the calculate workbook method. So I can actually run the calculations that are in that spreadsheet. And the results are in a cell, right? They're in the cell here for the mortgage calculator called the payment amount. And it'll just run a quick message box.show to show me, the result so that I actually got it back in my code. So if I run the application, it will show me the form. So there's, it's Bob, the amount, 830, doesn't matter, whatever that is. And if I hit the calculate button, I can already see it's not going to work because this is not the right reference. But we'll see what happens. Oh, maybe. I have a vague hope. Not getting so hopeful. No, sorry, I got a SOAP exception. I just didn't quite set that all up right before I got in here. I apologize for that, but you'll have to trust me that it's as simple as just opening the workbook reference. And, it would have set some cells and just done a message box.show to show it to me. So it's just the reference that was in there that I could have reset. Okay. So actually, I do have just a couple of minutes. What I'll do, this mortgage calculator, it doesn't really matter. I'm not going to go publish everything. But why don't, on this sheet, I will, I'll go get some data. So I'll get external data from other sources, from SQL Server. Litware server. I'll get it from the AdventureWorks database. I'll get the employee view. I don't care. I'm just grabbing some data from an external data source and tossing it into my application. So I'll put it right there. So there's the idea that I connected to a SQL Server database, and now I'm pulling this employee information in. So in order to get that to run, what I need to have the person do for me is going back to the data thing, to connections. So there's the actual data connection that got created. If I go to Properties, Definition, here's the connection string information, right, that goes into the ODC file. But what I can have them do for me is export the connection file. It's, the AdventureWorks connection.odc. The ODC file, by the way, is just a text file. So as long as they can give it to me, I can even edit it and change it up if I have to. Maybe I want to change how it's authenticating or something like that. But basically, they can give me that ODC file, will give me a good idea of what data they're after and what server it's on. Okay. Actually, I thought we had to finish at 12:20. Is that true or untrue? Okay. All right. So we got a few minutes left here. So that is the ODC file. Okay. So you need that. You edit it. You get it. You give it to the administrator. Then where we head off to is central administration. Oh, sorry. I have to, within here, I would, for example, I would create this thing called a data connection library. So I'd have to create one within my SharePoint site. So I would say my ODC files. So there's the reference to the URL, this actual library. And I would upload the ODC file that I was given, right? So this is now a data connection in a data connection library. Then, on the opposite side, like I said, this gets a bit confusing. But on the opposite side, under Excel Services, I also have to trust the data connection library. So I would have to add in the URL to allow it to run. Okay, so the site administrator has something to do. They have to get a hold of the ODC file, create a data connection library, and upload it. The administrator has something to do. They need to provide it as trusted to run. And then, don't forget, again, just final reminder about the settings. If I look at the trusted file locations for the documents library, doesn't matter. The allow external data must also be set to at least one of these, trusted data or trusted data and external. Has to be one of those. And finally, to do my UDF scenario, actually, I think that's what happened with my other site, now that I think about it. I may have forgotten to do that last checkbox, which would make some sense. So the user-defined functions also have to be allowed. Okay. So I think that's it. So Excel services, the box, the code, and thank you, there's another version of my bike there. Those evals that you have are extremely valuable to us. We would really appreciate if you could take a little bit of time just to fill those out. Remember, 9's the highest value, so we appreciate those too. But your comments are equally important as feedback for us. And that will come back to us as well, see how we're doing, right? Okay, so again, thank you very much for coming. And I'll just see if I got a couple of questions here on Excel services. Yes, over here. Yes?
We never mentioned any assembly name. So, in case we have two UDFs having the same name, how do we differentiate?
I'm not 100% sure, to be honest with you. I've never run across that situation.
Okay.
I mean, I would assume it would have something to do with the namespace, correct?
Sure, but we never mentioned any namespace over here.
I would attempt, yeah, no, that's true. But I could also attempt to resolve that through a strong name reference.
Okay.
So what I had actually a couple of deployment options for my UDF. I just used it literally from a file. What I really should have done is provided a strong name key and installed that into the global assembly cache.
Sure.
So I think what I'm certain of is that I could have made the 4-part name, strong name reference to the assembly, and that would have resolved my problem absolutely.
Sure. Okay. Another one was, do you have any pointers for web farm scenarios?
Have any pointers for?
Web farm scenarios, because over here we seem to be hosting files. So when we call the open workbook, will it always open the latest version always, or how will it work?
I'm not sure I understand the question. You're looking for some information in, just repeating it for their benefit. You're saying it's a web farm scenario.
Yes.
And I have a workbook that I want to run.
Right.
Okay, so it's going to be in some document library or other.
So if one of the web servers is incorrect, means doesn't have the correct file,
that would be impossible. Okay. Remember that any documents in a document library are actually stored in the content database, which is effectively in SQL Server.
Okay, so it's synchronized.
Yeah, well, not synchronized. No, I want to be clear about this.
Okay.
The web front ends are simply referencing the content, each of them, that's in the SQL Server database. So there's no replication going on. There only is one copy in the content database, and they're all pulling the same copy. So even if a web server went down, it doesn't matter. They're just all pulling from the same content database.
Okay.
So you don't have to worry about that.
What I misunderstood was that there was one copy on each server.
No, there's not.
Okay.
There's
so
one
it's content database.
There's one version of the truth, as they call it, in that document library, which is in a content database.
Cool.
So I'm going to take another question if I have one. I'll wait for the microphone because it's hard to hear.
In Spreadsheet, you mentioned some parameters.
Yes?
So is it possible to display those parameters as columns in document library?
Is it possible to display the parameters as columns in a document library? I think you're thinking of business data. Off the top of my head, I can't think of a way to display the parameters in a document library. I simply haven't tried it. Yep, here. Yes?
We are publishing the sheets into the Excel services. Can we publish sheets based on users? Means I have 2 users to my portal. One user should see only the one sheet, and the other user should see both the sheets.
I don't think the permissions can be applied at that type of a level. What they're specifying on publication is just simply what can and can't be seen. I'm trying. I'm guessing it might have to be something custom at that point in time. Can't think of a way out of the box to achieve that. Yes?
Getting data.
Do you want to repeat it just so the other people can?
How good is the performance of Excel services when we are talking about huge amounts of data, say running from a data warehouse which has about 10 million records or something like that? Is it as good or does it take time? Secondly, we realized that when we were running data from a cube in an Excel service and pivoting that, it was extremely slow and got hung up quite a bit times. I searched the TechNet and it said, you know what, don't do it for such large data.
That's absolutely correct. Obviously, running anything through the spreadsheet itself is going to be slower than if you were, say, manipulating data directly from the data source.
As of now, or in the current version, not be a replacement for a good BI tool.
By the way, it's not, there are quite a few limitations on what it can display. It's fairly basic. So if you're doing fairly advanced things in your spreadsheets, that they won't display. It's version 1. So, take it for what it is. I hope it will get better, but it's a good start.
Thank you.
So yeah, I would prefer to have other mechanisms for getting and summarizing my data, but I'm just stating that the reality is that a lot of information in a corporate environment is in spreadsheets. So I have to weigh that against the simplicity of just simply using the data. If it's too slow, I'm going to have to go in, I'm going to have to try and optimize. I'm over time. What I'll do is I'll just stop here. If you have additional questions, come on up. I'd be happy to answer them. But again, thank you very much for your time and enjoy the rest of your conference. So take care.